Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that really gets into the details you need. We want to thank our sponsor, PharmaAIacademy.com. That's PharmaAIacademy.com. They're the AI learning platform for people working in pharma. Seriously, if you're in the industry, upskilling on AI is, well, it's pretty essential now, so definitely check them out. Okay, so today we're taking a deep dive into Novo Nordisk. We're focusing on two really big recent announcements. First, their Q2 and first half 2025 financials. And second, a pretty major leadership change, including a new CEO. But here's what makes this really interesting, and this context came straight from you, our listener. On the exact day these things were announced, Novo Nordisk's stock just plummeted. An incredible 22% drop. I mean, that's not just a bad day. That was their biggest fall ever. And I think that kind of reaction tells you there's a lot more going on under the surface than just the headlines.
Exactly. A market reaction that strong, it's almost visceral, right? It shouts that there's a deeper story here. So our goal today is really to look beyond those official press releases, to read between the lines, try and figure out what underlying factors might be really driving this. What do these changes actually signal for Novo Nordisk, especially with investors reacting so dramatically? That's what we're going to explore.
Absolutely. And before we get any further, just the essential disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Okay, we're here to analyze the public information, help you understand the situation, not tell you where to put your money. Right, so let's jump into that leadership shakeup first. This wasn't exactly a quiet handover, was it? Novo Nordisk named Maziar Mike Doustdar as the new president and CEO. That's effective August 7th, 2025, taking over from Lars Fruergaard Jørgensen. That's a big change at the very top.
It really is. And what's interesting about Mike Doustdar is his track record. He was the EVP of International Operations. And, well, under his leadership over the past decade, that division, it more than doubled its sales. It hit about DKK 112 billion in 2024. That's huge. This part covers everything outside the U.S., employs almost 20,000 people. So he comes in with this proven ability to drive massive growth, especially internationally, which is particularly interesting given some of the headwinds we're seeing for Wegovy in the U.S. cash market and also slower uptake in some of those international markets he used to run. It suggests this may be a strategic shift or at least a really aggressive new focus on unlocking those global markets, perhaps to counter the U.S. issues.
Yeah, and the language used by the chair, Helgeland, when announcing Doustdar, it felt very pointed. He said, "Mike is an exceptional leader. We are confident that he's the best person to lead Novo Nordisk through its next growth phase." Okay, standard stuff maybe, but then Mike has consistently demonstrated the ability to drive growth. The market is developing rapidly, and the company needs to address recent market challenges with speed and ambition. That emphasis on the speed and ambition and recent market challenges, it really jumps out, doesn't it? What's your read on that?
That's a critical point. You take the chairman saying rapidly developing markets and recent challenges, and you put it next to Doustdar's own words. He talked about coming in with a sense of urgency, a laser focus on high performance, and this fierce determination for Novo Nordisk to aim higher than it's ever done. I mean, it paints a very clear picture, doesn't it? This isn't just routine succession planning. It was framed as a strategic move, an aggressive response to tackle the serious headwinds the company is facing, and the timing. Right alongside the disappointing financial news, it strongly suggests the need for a fresh, fast, bold approach is seen as critical right now.
Okay, so it's more than just the CEO. There are other big organizational changes happening on August 7th, too. They're merging research and early development and development into one single R&D unit. And Martin Holst Lange, who was EVP of Development, he's stepping up as Chief Scientific Officer to lead this new combined unit. The stated focus is accelerating innovation, especially in diabetes and obesity, which also means Marcus Schindler, the previous CSO and Head of Research and Early Development, is retiring. And then there's Emil Kongshøj Larsen. He was SVP for Europe and Canada. That region's about 20% of global sales. He's taking over Mike Doustdar's old job as EVP International Operations.
Right, and these shifts, they have real strategic weight. Consolidating R&D under one leader like Lange isn't just about saving costs. It feels like a strategic tightening. In a market where speed of innovation is everything and the competition is fierce, like we see with GLP-1s, bringing R&D together like this suggests they want to push key pipeline assets through much faster, maybe even prioritize certain things more aggressively. It looks like a direct response to market pressure, accelerate those future solutions, and promoting from within people like Lange and Larsen. It shows they're relying on proven internal talent to get this done quickly, to drive growth and pipeline success in this trickier environment. It's definitely a reshuffle with a clear purpose.
Okay, so those leadership changes are definitely significant, but like you said, they're only half the story. The other half, the bit that really spooked the market, That's the financial report. And at first glance, the headline numbers for the first half of 2025, they actually look pretty good. Sales up 18%, operating profit up 29%, both at CER, constant exchange rates. So that's adjusting for currency swings, right, to get a clearer view of the actual business performance.
Exactly, without the noise of currency fluctuations.
And there was also this positive bump, about DKK 3 billion, from gross to net sales adjustments from prior years hitting in Q2. So with those numbers looking okay on the surface, what happened? Why the massive stock drop?
That's the million-dollar question, or maybe the multi-billion-dollar one here. It all comes down to the updated full-year outlook for 2025. And that outlook tells a very different, much gloomier story. It's a significant downward revision. Before, they expected sales growth of 13 to 21%. Now, it's down to 8 to 14%. And operating profit growth, previously 16 to 24%, now slashed to 10 to 16%. I mean, these aren't small tweaks. It's a major shift in expectations for the rest of the year. That DKK 3 billion gross to net adjustment you mentioned, that's essentially catching up on past revenue, like from rebates. It was a one-off boost, kind of masked some underlying weakness in Q2. Investors, though, they looked right past that one-time good news to the really concerning forecast. That's why the market reacted so violently, despite those okay-ish first-half numbers.
Right, so this is where we get to the heart of the challenges. What specific reasons did they give in the report for lowering the outlook so much? What's really biting them?
Okay, this is where it gets specific about the headwinds for the second half of 2025. A huge one is Wegovy in the U.S. obesity market. They sound deeply concerned. They're seeing persistent use of compounded GLP-1s. And just to be clear for everyone, GLP-1s are this class of drugs for diabetes and obesity. Compounded means these custom-made versions, often unregulated, cheaper. They're a direct threat to branded drugs like Wegovy. Novo Nordisk specifically said unsafe and unlawful mass compounding has continued, even after the FDA grace period ended back in May. They even talked about entities marketing these fakes under the false guise of personalization. They're actually suing people over this stuff to protect patients. It's a massive ongoing problem for them. And it's not just the compounding. For Wegovy in the U.S., they're also seeing slower market expansion than they expected, plus more competition. Penetration in the cash pay market is lower than hoped. Their own NovoCare pharmacy is doing about 11,000 prescriptions a week versus maybe 20,000 in the broader retail cash channel. And even for insured patients, despite new efforts, uptake is slower than planned.
Again, slower market growth and competition biting. There is some good news for Wegovy, though. It became the only GLP-1 for obesity on the big CVS formulary from July 1st. And they're expecting a regulatory decision on using Wegovy for MASH, that's a liver disease, later this year. So positives, yes, but clearly overshadowed.
Wow, that's a lot hitting Wegovy just in the U.S. What about Ozempic, their other huge drug?
Yeah, Ozempic in the U.S. GLP-1 diabetes market's also getting hit. Negatively impacted by competition there too, so the pressure isn't just on the obesity side, it's hitting their core diabetes market as well. And finally, looking at Wegovy internationally in those IO markets Mike Doustdar used to run, sales are still growing fast globally, yes, but the report points to lower than expected penetration in some key international markets. And the reasons? Same story. Slower market expansion than hoped, and competition heating up there too. It's really a consistent theme across their main growth areas.
Okay, so it really sounds like competition, and especially these compounded drugs, are just hitting them hard from multiple directions, really challenging their core business. How does all that translate to the bigger financial picture, beyond just the headline sales and profit forecasts?
Well, the lower operating profit growth forecast reflects those lower sales expectations, obviously. Right. Though they did say it's partly offset by reduced spending. So they're clearly tightening the belt, cutting costs where possible to try and cushion the blow. And their free cash flow forecast is down too, now expected between DKK 35 and 45 billion. That's also hit by the lower sales growth, especially the lower GLP-1 volumes in the U.S., and just the whole complicated U.S. gross to net pricing system. It paints a picture of a company facing pretty significant external pressures and reacting with leadership changes and internal belt tightening.
So let's bring it all together. We've got the leadership change, the R&D shakeup, the grim financial outlook, the reasons cited. How do we connect all these dots back to that absolutely massive 22% stock price drop? I mean, it wasn't just a wobble, it was historic for Novo Nordisk. What does that kind of market reaction really tell us when you put everything together?
I think the market's reaction was so severe because it was this perfect storm, this convergence of factors hitting all at once. You had the sudden, unannounced CEO change. To investors, that often signals urgency, maybe even a crisis, a need to fix something fast. And that landed at the same time as a really significant cut to their financial outlook for their absolute crown jewels, Wegovy and Ozempic. Plus, the report explicitly spelling out the ongoing problems with compounded drugs and intense competition. These aren't temporary blips, they're serious, persistent headwinds. Investors suddenly had to absorb the full scale and likely duration of these challenges. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It felt like a fundamental reevaluation of Novo Nordisk's near-term growth story. Maybe a feeling that the earlier optimism about GLP-1 dominance was, well, maybe a bit overdone for now. For a company like Novo Nordisk, yeah, it was truly seismic.
Right. So thinking about you, our listener, trying to make sense of all this, why is understanding this whole complex situation important? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think it highlights something really important. You hear the board chairman talking about needing speed and ambition to tackle market challenges. You hear the new CEO talking about a sense of urgency and needing to aim higher. That language lines up perfectly with the financial headwinds they just reported. So the market's dramatic reaction, you could see it as a direct consequence of the company finally acknowledging, maybe implicitly, just how big these challenges really are. Investors might be thinking the CEO change is a sign they're getting really aggressive, maybe even a bit desperate to fix things. Or maybe it's a signal the problems are even worse than previously thought. Understanding this shows that even the giants aren't immune to market forces, and big internal changes often reflect serious external pressures.
Okay, so to quickly summarize our deep dive today, Novo Nordisk is definitely at a crucial point, a real inflection point. They're reacting to major market pressures, fierce competition, especially around Wegovy and Ozempic, and they're reacting with a new CEO, a restructured R&D, and a significantly lowered financial forecast. It's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Novo Nordisk often points out this huge statistic, right?
Yeah.
Around 1 billion people globally living with obesity, but only a tiny fraction, a few million, are actually getting treatment. That's a gigantic untapped market.
Mm-hmm.
The new leadership says they have the urgency and ambition to aim higher.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question is, how will this new team, with this new sense of urgency, actually navigate these tough challenges we've talked about, the compounding, the competition? How will they actually deliver on tapping into that massive potential? What will their next moves, their next reports tell us about their real strategy? Will they find a way, or will they have to fundamentally rethink their approach?
Definitely something to watch. And again, just to be absolutely clear, none of this has been financial advice. Our aim is just to give you a deeper understanding. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into what's happening at Novo Nordisk. And a huge thank you once again to our sponsor, PharmaAIacademy.com, the EI learning platform for people working in pharma. Do check them out. Keep digging for knowledge, everyone, and join us next time for another deep dive.